It begins with a glance, a spark, a moment where the world seems to narrow to the space between two people. She looks at you, but what she sees isn't you, not the flesh and blood man standing before her with your flaws, your history, your contradictions. What she sees is a silhouette, a shadow cast by the light of her own unmet longings. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist who spent his life mapping the labyrinth of the human psyche, called this phenomenon projection, the act of superimposing an internal fantasy onto another person. For women, he argued, this projection often takes the form of the animus, an unconscious, idealized image of masculinity that lives within their psyche. But when this inner image remains unexamined, it becomes a tyrant, shaping their perceptions, desires, and disappointments in relationships. The animus is not inherently negative. Jung described it as a necessary archetype, a bridge between a woman's conscious mind and the deeper layers of her unconscious. It helps her navigate the world of ideas, assertiveness, and logic, qualities traditionally associated with masculinity. But when the animus is immature or unintegrated, it distorts reality. It convinces her that the man in front of her is not a person, but a character in a story she's been writing since childhood. A story where he is the hero, the savior, the perfect counterpart to her unmet needs. She doesn't see you. She sees the outline of a figure she's been waiting to fill with her hopes, her fears, her unresolved fantasies. This is where the tragedy begins. Men, conditioned by society to derive their worth from female approval, mistake this projection for validation. They confuse being desired with being known. When she gazes at you with that intensity, you feel a surge of purpose. Finally, someone sees my potential, but the potential she sees isn't yours. It's the potential for you to become the man she's already imagined, the one who will heal her insecurities, fulfill her dreams, and play the role she's scripted in her inner theater. You are not a partner, but a placeholder, a stand-in for the myth she's crafted. Jung called this dynamic spiritual possession. The woman, unaware of her own projections, becomes a puppet of her unconscious animus. She attributes qualities to you that you don't possess: nobility, ruthlessness, wisdom, danger. And when you inevitably fail to embody them, she feels betrayed. But the betrayal is not yours. It's the collision of fantasy and reality. The man who initially captivated her with his mystery becomes predictable. The kind partner who listens becomes weak. The ambitious go-getter becomes selfish. Her disdain grows not because you've changed, but because you've revealed yourself as human. A flawed, complex individual who cannot be reduced to a symbol. Why do men fall into this trap? Because from boyhood, they're taught that their value lies in their utility to others. A good man is one who sacrifices, provides, and pleases. He is rewarded for suppressing his needs, his emotions, his boundaries in service of others' comfort. When a woman projects her animus onto him, he senses an opportunity to prove his worth. He leans into the role, molding himself to fit her vision, the protector, the fixer, the emotional caretaker. He believes that if he performs well enough, he'll earn her love. But love earned through performance is conditional, and conditions change. The animus-driven woman is not malicious. She is unconscious. She's been raised in a culture that romanticizes the idea of completion through romance. Fairy tales, films, and novels sell the myth that the right partner will fill the void within her. But that void isn't meant to be filled by another person. It's a call to inner work. Jung argued that until a woman confronts her animus, integrating it into her conscious psyche rather than projecting it outward, she'll cycle through relationships perpetually disappointed. Each man becomes a failed experiment, a flawed actor who couldn't bring her fantasy to life. For the man, the consequences are devastating. He invests years into a relationship, only to discover he's been performing for an audience of one. When the projection fades, he's left with an existential crisis. Who am I without her approval? His identity, so tightly wrapped in her perception, crumbles. He resents her for changing, but the truth is far darker. She never knew him to begin with. The man she loved was a hallucination, a composite of her unmet needs and cultural conditioning. This pattern is amplified by modern dating dynamics. Social media and dating apps commodify human connection, reducing people to profiles, swipeable images, and curated personas. Women bombarded with idealized images of romance develop ever more unrealistic expectations. Men, desperate to stand out, contort themselves into caricatures of confidence, humor, or sensitivity. Both parties collude in the illusion, each believing the other holds the key to their wholeness. But as Jung warned, projection is the thief of reality. The more we rely on others to mirror our worth, the further we drift from our authentic selves. The animus isn't the sole culprit. Jung's theories exist within a broader framework of individuation, the lifelong process of integrating the unconscious into consciousness. For men, this means confronting their own anima, the inner feminine archetype. Just as women project their animus onto men, men project their anima onto women, idealizing them as paragons of purity, nurturing, or eroticism. The man who refuses to face his anima becomes trapped in a cycle of adoration and resentment, worshiping women as goddesses while secretly despising them for their humanity. But the anima and animus are not enemies. They are teachers. They reveal the parts of ourselves we've disowned, the qualities we've labeled unacceptable and exiled to the unconscious. For the woman, the animus represents her repressed assertiveness, her intellectual rigor, her capacity for boundaries. For the man, the anima embodies his vulnerability, his intuition, his emotional depth. Until these aspects are reclaimed, relationships remain battlegrounds, where we fight to control the other's projections rather than confront our own shadows. Jung's insights are often misinterpreted as misogynistic, but his goal was liberation, not blame. He sought to expose the unconscious games that keep men and women trapped in cycles of dissatisfaction. The problem isn't women or men, it's unconsciousness. It's the refusal to take responsibility for our inner worlds, to acknowledge that the flaws we see in others are often reflections of our own unmet needs. Complain man who complains that modern women are too demanding, what he's really confronting is his own fear of inadequacy. The woman who laments that all men are emotionally stunted is often avoiding her own discomfort with vulnerability. Projection is a defense mechanism, a way to externalize inner conflicts. But as Jung famously said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. The path out of this maze begins with a question: what am I refusing to see in myself? For the man entangled in a woman's animus projection, this means asking, why did I abandon myself to earn her love? Why did I conflate performance with worth? For the woman, it means inquiring, what void am I trying to fill through him? What parts of myself have I outsourced to a fantasy? This is brutal work. It requires dismantling the stories we've inherited about gender, love, and worth, and facing the raw, unedited truth of who we are. It demands that we stop seeking completion in another and start confronting the incompleteness within. Most will resist. It's easier to blame, to resent it, to cling to the familiar pain of projection than to venture into the unknown territory of self-awareness. But those who dare will find something unexpected on the other side. Freedom. Not freedom from relationships, but freedom within them. The freedom to love without possession, to connect without projection, to see and be seen, not as fantasies, but as flawed, magnificent humans doing their best to navigate the complexity of existence. The crisis of projection is not a dead end. It's a crossroads. Carl Jung's concept of individuation offers a way forward, but it is not for the faint of heart. Individuation is the process of becoming whole, of integrating the fragmented parts of the psyche into a cohesive self. It's a journey that requires courage, solitude, and a willingness to confront the darkest corners of one's soul. For men trapped in the cycle of performance and projection, individuation is the path to liberation. It's the antidote to the poison of external validation, the remedy for the emptiness that comes from living as a reflection of others. Individuation begins with a rupture, a moment when the pain of living inauthentically outweighs the fear of change. For many men, this rupture arrives in the aftermath of a failed relationship. He's played the role beautifully, the reliable partner, the charming suitor, the stoic protector. But when the relationship crumbles, he's left with a haunting question. Who am I when no one is watching? This question is the gateway to individuation. It's an invitation to shed the masks and confront the raw, unperformed self beneath. The process is often misunderstood as self-improvement, but it's closer to self-excavation. Individuation isn't about becoming better, it's about becoming whole. It requires men to face the parts of themselves they've disowned. The vulnerability labeled weakness, the anger labeled dangerous, the sensitivity labeled unmanly. These exiled fragments don't disappear. They fester in the unconscious, emerging as self-sabotage, addiction, or unexplained resentment. To integrate them, a man must descend into what Jung called the shadow, the repository of everything he's denied in himself. Shadow work is grueling. It involves staring into the mirror of one's soul and acknowledging the ugliness alongside the beauty. The man who prides himself on kindness must confront his capacity for cruelty. The nice guy must admit his repressed anger. The stoic must face his longing for connection. This isn't intellectual work, it's visceral, emotional labor. It requires journals, therapy, meditation, or creative expression. Tools that bypass the rational mind and access the subconscious. As the shadow integrates, something shifts. The man no longer feels compelled to perform. He stops molding himself to fit others' expectations because he's no longer at war with himself. His worth isn't contingent on external approval. It's rooted in an unshakable sense of self. Women sense his transformation immediately. They're drawn not to his posturing, but to his presence, the quiet confidence of a man who's made peace with his contradiction. Jung warned that individuation is a solitary path. It requires periods of withdrawal from the noise of the world to confront the noise within. This solitude is often misinterpreted as loneliness, but it's a fertile void where the seeds of the self can germinate. In this space, the man discovers passions and values buried under years of conditioning. He learns to distinguish between what he truly wants and what he's been taught to want. This is the birth of authenticity. Authenticity terrifies the status quo. Society thrives on predictability, on men and women playing assigned roles. The individuated man disrupts this order. He can't be manipulated by guilt or flattery. He doesn't chase prestige, wealth, or sexual conquest to validate his worth. He stands firm, not out of stubbornness, but out of alignment with his core self. Those still trapped in projection will resent him. They'll label him selfish for setting boundaries, arrogant for refusing to perform, cold for prioritizing truth over flattery. But the individuated man is neither selfish nor cold. He's simply no longer enslaved by the need to please. His relationships transform. He attracts partners who are drawn to his essence, not his facade. These relationships lack the dizzying highs of projection-based love, but they offer something far more profound: mutual recognition. Two whole beings, each grounded in their own truth, coming together not to complete each other, but to share their For the woman entangled in animist projections, a parallel journey awaits. She must confront her own shadow, the parts of herself she's deemed unfeminine, her ambition, her anger, her intellectual rigor. She must recognize that the ideal man she seeks is a mirror of her own disowned power. As she integrates her animus, her relationships shift. She no longer seeks a man to rescue her or validate her worth. She seeks a partner who respects her autonomy. This is the alchemy of individuation. Two people, each whole unto themselves, creating a relationship greater than the sum of its parts. There's no fusion, no enmeshment, no desperate clinging. There's only choice. The daily decision to walk alongside each other, not out of need, but out of mutual respect and curiosity. Jung's vision of love is radical. It rejects the cultural obsession with romance as salvation. Instead, it frames relationships as mirrors, reflecting back the parts of ourselves we need to confront. The individuated man doesn't flee conflict. He leans into it, knowing that friction is a catalyst for growth. He doesn't demand perfection from his partner. He welcomes her humanity, knowing it's the grit that polishes his own soul. But individuation isn't a destination. It's a lifelong dance. There will be moments of regression, days when old patterns resurface. The key is to meet these moments with compassion, not judgment. Each relapse into projection is an opportunity to deepen self-awareness, to ask, what fear is driving me back into this role? The rewards of this work are immeasurable. The individuated man experiences a quality of love that transcends the transaction. He loves not to fill a void, but to celebrate existence. His presence becomes a gift, not a performance. He doesn't sacrifice for his partner. He chooses actions aligned with his values. He doesn't fear losing her because his worth isn't tied to her presence. This freedom terrifies those still trapped in projection. To the man who defines himself by his relationship status, the individuated man seems detached. To the woman seeking a fantasy, he seems unavailable, but in reality, he's the most present of all. He's fully there, not as a projection, but as a person. Jung's message is clear. The only way out of the labyrinth of projection is through the self. There are no shortcuts, no formulas, no guarantees. But for the man willing to endure the fire of self-confrontation, the payoff is a life of unparalleled depth and authenticity. He becomes, in Jung's words, a light unto himself, a beacon for others still lost in the dark. In the end, love is not something we find, it's something we become.